Danielle Smith. I'm guest hosting with Common Sense Calgary. We're interviewing the candidates for the Calgary civic election. And up now is Ward 13 candidate Dan McLean. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Danielle. Like I just said, it's an honor. Thank you very much for having this opportunity.
My pleasure. So let's begin by talking about why you decided now. Why did you decide to put your name forward to run?
I knew you were going to ask that question. I've always wanted to, Danielle. It's one of those things back, I think I told the story back when I was a teenager. My father ran for a nomination and lost by 20 votes. And I remember crying and whatnot. And he said, it's probably for the best because he's a teacher. He had to farm, a young family. He said maybe later on in his career, in his life, after he'd maybe run. And so that's where I'm at. I've looked at this. I'm a voracious reader. You read a lot of nonfiction, fiction, biography, politicians. And so now at this point, I've raised my family. I started young, had my business career, started my business in 1998 and sold it. So now I'm at a point in my life where the kids are raised. I've had my business career and it's time to serve. I can get back and to do what I've always wanted to do, which I guess is run for office.
Let's talk a bit about your business, because I think it's going to have some crossover with some of the things I'll ask you about golf courses and how they should be managed at the City of Calgary. But tell us about your history.
Okay, so that would be, I worked at a GM dealership for almost a decade, to the point where then you're kind of running it. And so you have to be born into a car dealership, which was my goal then. And so I started my own company and turned into with golf cars, though, not regular automobiles. And I guess the story is my father will bring him up. His buddy had some golf cars they had bought to go golfing, and the deal fell through. I bought them, put on my acreage, which was on the corner of the two busy highways between Camrose and Edmonton. And they sold like hotcakes. Everybody wanted it for the farm or for the lake. And so then I had to source out another supplier in Portland, who was one of the biggest dealers of golf cars in the Pacific Northwest. And then I was bringing them up by the truckload. And again, selling them like crazy until I got noticed. And then they gave me the distribution rights for Easy Go golf cars of Augusta, Georgia. And they said, we needed somebody in Canada. We can't wait for you to open up in Vancouver. And I said, well, I'm in Alberta. It's 1,000 miles away, but your typical American doesn't know geography very well. So I immediately said, okay, I'll do it. I'll take on this territory, and moved my family and business to headquarters in Calgary, keep the shop outside of Edmonton, and branched to Vancouver. And then you sold the golf cars to the golf courses, parts and service, rentals for like big tournaments like the Stampede. Spruce Meadows was a big account. Supplied the Olympics in 2010. So similar to what you would do at a car dealership, but with golf cars. And 20 some year run at that. And then, like I said, and then once I sold it, it's time to do something now. I guess it's something I've wanted to do, like I said, and here I am.
All right, let's then talk. We'll go back to talking about how running a business gives you some perspective on how you might manage the role of city council. But first, let's talk about what you're hearing in the ward. What are the three big issues?
Well, the biggest issues, you would think it would be the taxes, which a lot of it is. People don't mind paying the taxes. They've seen their property taxes go up high and their business taxes. But to be honest, I've talked term limits with you, but the biggest one is transparency and just how City Hall, they just don't seem to be getting along. It seems like they see Mayor Nenshi and a lot of council just bring out ideas. They can go behind closed doors in camera, and they bully and argue, and then they come out, and I think that's the biggest one. They'd like to see a city council and mayor maybe listen more to the people and be a little more transparent. And so that's the biggest concern, I guess. There's a list of them, but that's the one I think is the most common. They see their representatives not listening to them.
Mm-hmm. Any other issues that come up at the door specific to Ward 13?
Well, specifically because the incumbent in Ward 13 has been there 20 years, looking for her 7th or 8th term. Again, who originally campaigned, like you said, on term limits, which is a big issue for me. So they've seen the same city councilor, and a lot of them, I think, 2/3 of the constituents have not voted for that person. And the other, that 1/3 that do, most are on name recognition alone. So they're looking for something new, for change. So I guess change is the big theme, Danielle, with not even in my ward, but in the city. People are getting more engaged, I think, in politics than ever before, seeing what happened with the dumpster fire south of us and the federal government, provincial. So they're paying attention for this municipal election, and which is good, because most people don't.
So let's then talk about the incumbent, Diane Collier-Cart. When you look back on the last 4 years, are there decisions that she made that you would have made differently?
Well, the tax hikes, every time that the tax hike has come through, she has voted for them, except in election years. And this last year you have it, and you'll see that's a political calculation. So I think that we can find efficiencies and reduce spending before we just always, the go-to thing is let's raise taxes. There's a few things, again, we disagree on term limits. We disagree on, like I said, the tax increases on the green line. There's a lot of different, the Olympics, I think, was another one that I think we all are breathing a sigh of relief that that didn't go through, because we've been, during a pandemic and severe financial pressures. So I think what I hear from the people when you go door to door, and like I said, I've been doing it for over a year, and then mailing out flyers and just listening to the people, response. You have to be able to respond to them. So that's the biggest other complaint they'll say, that when I put in, whether it's a pothole or the 14th Street BRT, which a lot of people weren't happy with that. Some arts funding projects, which again, we all like art, but let's fund it locally and maybe affordably. Those are issues I think I would listen a little bit more and respond to the constituents more than, I think, from what I hear, it's either they don't hear back from her, or when they do, it's from one of her representatives.
All right, let's talk about the balance between spending and tax increases or tax cuts. Let's deal with the spending side first. So do you think that the council has the level of spending about right? Do you think that it's too high? Do you think it's too low?
Well, I think it's too high. Yeah, that's a given. There's let's say a $4 billion budget. And on this issue of the spending, like I talked about infrastructure projects, which seem to be a little overbuilt. Some are provincial and some are not. So I guess that there's a little nuance there. But on the spending, I think where I see where there could be savings, it's in the administration itself. So if you check some of the ads, it's not the frontline workers. I've talked to the bus drivers, the transit people, the union workers, and the guy that he says, I'm working in the metal shop, and I get paid well, and I work hard, but I see there's a shop foreman, and then there's another guy above him, then there's another manager above him, and so it seems like we've got a top-heavy management system. And again, it's I'm not advocating for cuts or layoffs, maybe some through attrition, but I think that's where we can lead by example. Maybe we could take, like Ralph Klein led by example, and even, the UCP government took some pay cuts. Kenny took a 10% pay cut. I think we should do the same as, you represent the politicians and mayors. We could take not only a freeze on wages, but a pay cut, and then maybe expect the rest of the administration to do the same.
Mm-hmm. I'll talk to you more in depth about the capital budget, but let's just stay with the operating budget for a couple more minutes. Give me some idea of how you might approach that. I mean, as a business owner for 20 years, do you have some techniques that you learned for how to bring spending down?
Well, unfortunately, like I said, I had 3 branches at one time and some little smaller outlets that you're affiliated with. And after the 2008, 9, 10 financial crash, money dried up. I didn't like it, but I had to close down a full branch. You had to lay off people. You had to suck it in and just reduce your spending on everything. And so that's what I think, the same thing here. I see the city right now, they're actually continuing hiring. And, this is not the time to be doing that. So I would look at a wage and hiring freeze, like I just mentioned. And then this has been talked about, but an organizational review in the departments. If we could go inside and find out where people are pulling their weight, maybe where we can see. So, and wear different hats. Now, they have a much smaller operation. This is a bigger business, but you're right to say that running a business does give you some experience in seeing on how to handle these things. So in the case where I myself would wear lots of different hats. So you might Instead of going on the sales role talking to the golf courses, I'd hop in that truck and drive the golf cars around, or get in there behind the mechanic and twist the wrench. I mean, sometimes we all got to pitch in and maybe work a little overtime, not charged overtime though. But the organizational review will, again, I don't have all the answers, but you'd have to look in the books. So again, having experience with looking at a balance sheet and a P&L statement can maybe give you some experience to see, where there's savings and efficiencies to be found.
So let's talk about it. So let me ask you a few other questions on that front. So some of the council members have proposed other ways that they can look at finding efficiencies by privatizing or contracting out. So for instance, contracting out the operations of golf courses, or a portion of the garbage collection. Do you generally support that type of approach, or do you not think that's the right answer?
100%, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I see Edmonton doing a lot of privatization with sanitation and garbage removal. And in my experience, I have seen the private sector do the same job more efficiently and more cost effective. The golf courses is a prime example. So we had 6 golf courses, and even that. So at a golf course, if you walk in, there's a kid washing the golf cars, or they're renting them out. There's a lot of marshals that are volunteering just to get some comp golf. Or there's the person, golf pro, and sometimes they call themselves glorified sweater folders, because they're just looking at the food and beverage or the fixed goods, and they have a lot lower salary than you saw some of these golf courses, where the managers and the front staff are way overpaid, and so they're running consistent losses in these golf courses. And if you were a private business, you couldn't continue in that fashion. You would have some layoffs or reduce some salaries. But because it's unionized, and I think we've seen that with lifeguards. I've heard of stories of some pretty enormous salaries on lifeguards and Zamboni drivers. And not that I don't care about these people. I mean, everybody needs a job, and if there's more behind the scenes, because I think I was talking with my son just in the weekend at Easter about the Zamboni drivers. And he said, but they make the ice and they do this and the lines and the coloring. I mean, some of these are still important jobs, but again, within reason, we have to see what they'd be paid. But the golf courses, I mean, that to me is a no-brainer. A quick example then, because they put up a bid for then their rentals for their golf car units. And so I'd submit that bid and say, here's how you can do it. We can lease them to you on a 4-year lease, pay your payments 6 months on, 6 months off. So you're only making your payments while you're making, creating revenue. And they said, no, we want to do it this way. And then we want you to pick them up and store them. And we want you to do this. And we want you to haul them back for repairs. And then you can send us a bill at the very end for refurbishing. And so the company that got that contract year after year was overbilling like crazy. And I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. But again, it was a very inefficient model of the way they were doing that. So get out of business wherever possible. Why can't we privatize or see if there's maybe another way of doing things? We have to price all these things.
You've already mentioned public art. So they did modify the way public art projects are going to be approved. Do you think they made the right decisions there, or would you still make some changes?
No, that was good. That was a nice step forward. I mean, I like that idea. And, it looks like they've appointed a good person to do that. And again, most people haven't really been following municipal politics beyond who's mayor or maybe the local city councilor. So the way they were doing in the past, I'd have to question, why they're maybe submitting these, were they untendered bids? Because it seemed like there's a huge amount of money for, like, say, example, the Beaufort Towers or the big blue ring and whatnot. So it sounds like they've got a handle on it. Again, I think it's an election year, Danielle, so they're actually concerned about snow removal this year. They're concerned about tax hikes. They're concerned about art. And then will they just fall asleep and then let things go back as business as usual? Again, where I think maybe the administration is kind of pulling a lot of strings and running the show, and councilors maybe just go to barbecues or some, I don't know. But again, that's one of those things when you get on the inside, you'll have a better idea. But I think they're going in the right direction with the art.
Okay, you put a few things on the table that I want to just follow up on. Snow removal, what are you hearing in your community? How upset are people, and what do you think should be done about it? Very much,
very much. I'd be out there with people, volunteers, and I can't tell you how many people we help push out of their crescents. They just move the snow around and attract people left and right. And it's not the first year we've had snow here in Calgary, these snow events. Now, so they're upset. And there's other people I talk to, like, this guy's got a truck with a blade, and a lot of people have a skid steer or bobcat. I mean, there's a lot of, in every community. So again, I don't know the efficiencies or how this would work in real time. But if you could put a lot of people on subcontract at a moment's notice that have these materials at their tools and trucks and equipment at their disposal to call up in a moment's notice and put them on a tender list to get it done quickly, something like that. We've got to look at some creative ideas, maybe just some new thinking and change is good. But no, they're very upset.
Okay, I'm going to get to the issue of taxes, but since we've been talking about spending, let's continue on talking about the capital side of the budget. So some pretty big ticket items. Let's begin with the Green Line. It was supposed to be a 3-level of government-funded project, 40 kilometers, $4.5 billion. It's now half the size, and the cost has already gone up to $5.5 billion. The transportation minister has said he doesn't like the way it's designed because it doesn't connect in with the existing system. So this is a problem you're going to inherit if you end up winning in October. What would you do about it?
When I end up winning. Yes, I see that. Just Rick McIver, they put a hold on it. And I've had this discussion with many, many people and read through it. And my position has always been that we don't have a finished plan. Number one, I mean, they don't have it, before we can start sending money and funding and spending this type of taxpayers' dollars, you should have a finished, coherent plan and budget in place. So I'm glad they put a freeze on it. And again, I'm in the Southwest, so the Green Line doesn't affect my ward. So I have a little easier time of saying, let's revisit this. And there's other components here, Danielle, that I think we should look at, even just with the ring road that they just built. That is 8 lanes. It's massive. It could go to 16 lanes, room for it. Same with transit. I'm seeing the 14th Street BRT, which they did in my ward, and it's empty. It's just like a ghost train. Nobody on it, and it doesn't really seem to get anywhere fast, and nobody likes it. And that was, again, a tremendous amount of money being spent on that. So before we go further, again, let's really review this. Just because the federal government or the provincial government is going to throw a lot of money at it doesn't mean it's free. I mean, it's all taxpayers' dollars. And I think we should also be aware that we have ride sharing and self-driving cars are down. I was told when I was a kid we'd have flying cars by now.
I watched the Jetsons too. It's still a little ways away.
Yeah, we're not there yet. But but then do we spend billions and billions of dollars and go further in debt and put that burden on the taxpayers when these things could be happening? So I'm not BRTs. I'm not against those. That's a good component. So we better see a coherent plan for me to want to vote for that and to spend that kind of money. Is it going under the river? Is it going over the river? We haven't even connected to the airport. Every major city, if you traveled, that's a really huge component to me. I can get off the plane and take a train or some type of rapid transit to the downtown core. We've got to revitalize our downtown core, and that has never been done. So riddle me that. So there's a little, so that's some common sense here might come in handy.
Okay, let's talk about the other 4 big capital projects as well. So the event center in conjunction with the Calgary Flames, the BMO Center expansion for convention space, the Arts Commons transformation, and the Foothills Fieldhouse. So when the city voted to approve these projects, they did so against the advice of their CFO. They didn't think that they could afford them all at once. Do you think that this was the right move?
I think we're seeing a lot of legacy projects going down the road. Unfortunately, and again, that's for term limits, and just not to avoid the question, but why they're so important. Because the longer you're there, the guy seems like you become a little bit out of touch with your constituencies, with the money that you're handling, $1 million, $1 billion, you start to lose touch with that. And then you're worried about getting reelected or your legacy. So these projects, a lot of big ticket items. Now, as far as, and I'm kind of split down the middle on them because I want a beautiful city. If Edmonton has a beautiful arena, I want one too. I love hockey. I love the Hitman and lacrosse and the concerts. I don't want to see Calgarians miss out on those things. I followed that deal closely, because there's many other deals put on the table. Mm-hmm. So is there a perfect deal on that one? But it looks to me that it is pretty much done going forward. I wouldn't say let's scrap it now. So we're pretty close to it, and there is some profit sharing. The city owns the stadium. the arena. There will be some tax benefits from parking and maybe increased business taxes and development in that area. So that one, as it was going down, and again, I think I have the luxury, I guess, of not taking a hard stance because these things have already been approved.
Well, let me tell you what I think that I'm hearing you say, and you can tell me if I'm interpreting this right. If you had to choose only one of those 4 projects, you would have chosen the event center.
Yes.
Okay, let's then talk a bit. It's interesting to talk about the relationship with the administration. So you've talked about how you think that the council has some dysfunction, and I want to talk about that first. What do you think that you would do differently? How would you improve the tone or the relationship on council?
Well, we're guaranteed to see a new city council one way or another in October, just because we have a lot of incumbents stepping down, and we've got several that are past their best before date, as they say. So that's going to be, for myself, what I would do immediately is reach out and talk with, which I have already, lots of different people that are running in each ward. There's several, and I've talked to many of them, even the people in my ward that are, my competition. I want to reach out to everybody and talk to them. And the same thing, if I was fortunate enough to be elected, then that would be key. Whoever the mayor is and council, number one, let's get along. And whether I agree with some of your political stances, I think that's what people are the most upset at. Like I said at the onset, that people want to see more transparency. Let's not go in behind closed doors. I think I heard one councillor say we should take the easy chairs. I didn't even know, but there's like nice, really comfortable, lazy boys, and when they go behind closed doors, so they can chat this out. So let's make people stand. Maybe I don't know, but I'm a team player. I've always been able to get along with lots of different people. Sometimes you'll butt your head, and you're not going to roll over because my first immediate responsibility is to Ward 13 constituents, but then overall the city. For taxpayers. But then having gone down this road, Danielle, it's also important to get along with our provincial and federal counterparts. So, that's where we derive a lot of our revenue. So, where Nenshi is, fighting with our Premier Kenny, I don't know how advantageous that is. Again, we should be a little more neutral and not be so partisan on that municipal level, because that's the idea of not having a party at this level, which is what attracted me to municipal politics rather than provincial or federal. There is no party whip. There isn't any party line where you have to adhere to it. You can have your own ideas, and I'll represent that. But at the same time, consensus is key. And if we can do that, we can move the city forward. And I think we're going to see that in October.
Well, a lot of people defer to the administration's recommendation, and I'm interested in knowing, because you've been a business owner and a decision maker, how do you see the role of a council member? Should they be more involved, or should they really be more hands-off and really just play an approval role of administration's decisions?
Well, the former, hands-on. That's the whole idea, because I see a lot of people like that. Number one, I know I've seen in these last debates over the guidebook or the speed limits or fluoridation of our water, we can put things out. I'm not against plebiscites. When you elect me as your, some people say, well, you've elected me to make that decision. No, I still want to listen to the grassroots and then make my decision. But I will then want to inform my residents and go into the administration and see what they're saying and have more of an impact. Again, that's why, having more people in business, having just a grand idea is one thing. But the administration, I think we've got a lot of qualified people, and we better, because we're paying them a fortune, and there's a lot of them. But let's, from what I've seen, I've sat in on some council meetings, and you get your briefing and your updates or different documents that, sky high, that the administration will put forward 2 proposals. Plan A, which is unpalatable, is horrible, and Plan B, which is just a little less horrible. So you've got a binary choice of 2 things that aren't good. There's a third choice in there probably. So maybe that's where council, let's pull our socks up and get to work here. That's our job, I think, to get more involved in digging the administration. Some of it's going to be, it's going to be a huge learning curve. And it already has been for the last couple of years, because you have to go through and you see all the bylaws and the zoning. This isn't some little show here at Calgary. It's a big metropolitan city, the best in the world, I might add. And let's get into the meat and potatoes of the, that budget. And again, these documents are long and you have to read it. And I've talked to other council people, councilors that have, that do the reading, and others that I think they get their staff just to give them a summary, and then that's it. So this is not a part-time job. I think it's an 80-hour-a-week job. And if anybody wants to run for council, I think they should be aware of that.
Okay, let's then talk about how to deal with the tax side of the picture, because it doesn't seem like the spending gets set and then the taxes get set according to how much revenue needs to be raised. And I'm interested in knowing what you're hearing about how people feel about the tax level. Let's talk about residential side, and then we can also talk business side. What are people telling you?
Well, that's a mixed. So you'll get a lot of people that are just happy because they love living here, and they don't criticize council. I mean, they may like to see change and think things can be done better or taxes could be lower. But like I said, they don't mind paying taxes as long as their services are being provided efficiently. So what I see is like, okay, you can raise my taxes, but make sure my snow is removed, make sure those potholes are done, and make sure my police and fire department are properly funded. So I mean, that's number one. But number two, of course they don't want to see them going up. So the person that is paying attention, and we've seen 40% tax increase over the last 10 years on residential and businesses especially. So because of the downtown core being carved out and hollowed out, they seem to be transferring that all over onto the businesses, and this is just unaffordable. You'll see business owners, they say, I've got to make $5,000 before I open my doors. The property tax is like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, and so before they pay any staff, and that goes straight to the city. And remember, small business is the core of any economy, so we can't burden them with that kind of taxes. So if it means less spending, which is, I guess, the only alternative. And nobody likes that. No one likes austerity. And they say, oh, you just want to come and chop and cut and do this and that. No, but we have to look very carefully. These businesses, they can't afford another tax hike, especially after the pandemic.
What about new tax revenue sources? So if you can't afford an increase in property taxes, there have always been proposals about diversifying the tax base for municipalities with the different municipal associations, and even last year with the tax report that came out. Do you support having new tax powers?
No, I see council approve that pretty overwhelmingly, where now they, park in front of your home. So, I mean, that, you mentioned that people, they don't even know that, you may be in the suburbs. I mean, I'm in the Southwest. And so there's a lot of people that have driveways, but if you don't, I mean, now you're pretty much, paying an extra tax. And even then, so they did, taxing on that, or liquor and other sin taxes and consumption taxes. Instead of looking at new ways to tax and creative ways to tax, you should be looking at more creative ways to cut your spending. So, I mean, I'm always going to go back to that line of let's see where we can, before we tax. I mean, we've got rainy day funds. We've got a tremendous amount of assets, the city of Calgary. Nobody talks about that either. Billions of dollars in land assets. So before we, again, looking at it as a business, and before I started raising my prices so that I'm, pushing myself out of business, if I'd maybe sell some equipment, or if you had some property, some land, you sell that first. You don't go buy a second car or third car or whatever. So again, this is where the city's got to be looking at those. Instead of their go-to thing is always tax first. How can we get some more money from the public? And again, we're very strained right now. We're at the breaking point. So I think we're on an upward trend of recovery. Let's not spoil it by throwing in more taxes and possibly ruining that.
Talk to me about that. Why do you think we're on an upward trend of recovery in Calgary?
Well, I think optimism is good. I mean, Calgary's always been that type of resilient, optimistic city. I mean, we are the core, and I don't think we should ever forget that and lose our identity of, I'm a farm boy, grew up with family in oil and gas, but I've also got nurses and teachers in my family. Look at it this way, Diane. We've got 4.5 million people here in Alberta. Now, if you take Saskatchewan and Manitoba and North Dakota and Montana, they add up to about that. And why is that? Because it's Alberta. This is Alberta. We are, so don't, we've got we've got the tech sector coming here. I think we've got just that type of population. We're younger, we're go-getters. And so now that we're at this point where the pandemic is ending and people can't wait, and I mean, we've got to open up, the sooner the better, and attract more businesses, encourage our oil and gas industry. I mean, we're a resource province. We have it, so it is every other province and country, not every other province, but lots of places around the world they're not going to stop exploiting and enriching themselves and lowering the tax burden on their citizens. So we have to do the same. So that's Alberta. I just think, the home of the Stampede, we've got the Oilers and the Flames. I mean, as a province, I mean, we're pretty damn cool.
Oh, all right. Let's then talk about one of the other big issues that has arisen in the first part of the year, which is the Guidebook to Great Communities. Have you heard any resistance to that plan when you've been door knocking?
Well, first we had to educate people about it. So, and again, myself, who's paying pretty close attention to all three levels of government, when that was brought to my attention, because all this was being discussed for a long time, years behind closed doors again, and then sprung upon us 6 months of an election year where a lot of people are on their way out. So where was the consultation? I mean, they can tell them all you want to. So you've seen a lot of flip-flopping on there from city councilors, including Diane Collier-Urquhart, who was really for it, and now she's maybe voting against maybe reviewing it more. They're all looking at this through a political lens. What's good for me? And again, that's why term limits, you're not worried about getting reelected. You can actually make the tough choices and say what's good or what's wrong.
Well, let me ask you to elaborate on your basic approach to development, because I think this has been the big battle, is that do you densify and grow up, or do you allow for new development of new subdivisions and new communities? Both of them have affordability aspects. In the one case, if you've got a new young family, buying in a new suburb can be a way to get an affordable home. Or if you have more densification with multifamily, that can also be a way of addressing the affordability issue. How do you see it? What would your approach be?
Well, you're correct. There's two sides of the coin there, because I mean, there's nothing wrong with some densification and building up the downtown core. And maybe affordability is a huge aspect there. But when I hear from residents, again, because number one, they weren't informed that this could be happening, and it would be coming to a neighborhood near you, where we talked about parking being charged for it, because parking in a lot of these places already, in these wards where they want to densify, is really, really difficult to find a parking spot already. Or you move to this neighborhood because you liked your view, and now that could change because there's a 3-story multifamily unit going in there. So a little bit of densification is necessary, but it shouldn't be a broad scope of where we're just going to go ahead and try to make this city more like San Francisco, Seattle, and New York, Detroit. I think we can all look at how those cities are doing right now. I mean, we're Alberta, so we're not like the Lower Mainland where we have the mountains and the water blocking us off of where we have to go. We have room to expand. And I've talked with, there's a lot of different developers, when they're worried about maybe the cost of the infrastructure to get out to these new communities, they will pick up that burden. I mean, they're paying for that, not the taxpayer. So I'm not against some greenfield development where, again, if you want to live in the suburbs and travel, then that you should be able to have that right and not be punished for it. And if you want to live downtown, I mean, that's informed and have a vibrant process with some due diligence on who, and I think that, again, all the guidebook is not terrible, because I mean, we will have to densify areas, and there is a community engagement process in there. Again, my biggest beef with that, Danielle, is the fact that, number one, they sprung it on everybody without any consultation, and they did it where half a council is leaving, and you're going to push this through, like, again, as a legacy, and maybe a new council decide on that. So that's my biggest beef with it. So I see both sides of the coin there.
Let's talk just a bit about downtown vacancy, because I gather there's as much room as 100 to 140,000 employees that could be accommodated in all that vacant space. Do you have some thoughts on how to address it?
I've heard many ideas. Like some of them, it just sounds really good, because I love to see more affordable housing, or you house the homeless people or transient population. But again, that's not that easy. You just can't take a building and start plumbing it and having bathrooms in every apartment and the cost of that. So I'd rather, of course, see businesses. We have to bring businesses to them. And so some lower business taxes, which again, council is going the opposite way on that. Some incentives. I have some really good news with Infosys and some other tech companies moving here. And again, that's where I think there's a little bit of optimism coming to our city, where we are getting to see a lot more tech coming. Oil prices are going up, and the demand is going up, and that's just not. Oil and gas is going to be around for the foreseeable future, and it does employ a ton of people and creates tremendous wealth for our province and our country. So let's explore all alternative energy sources and do your research, but we can do both. I like to see that small modular nuclear that they're talking about. So we can look at other sources, but until then, let's bring jobs back here. And so business incentives, tax incentives, and I think we're seeing a bit of that. So
when you talk about incentives, I mean, the city has identified $100 million through Calgary Economic Development to give direct subsidies. Is that the kind of thing you would support?
Yes, yeah. We again, there should be a rigorous review process so that that money's not being wasted and given out to maybe some special interest groups, or like you'll see, and not to go down that road. But yes, I have no problem with some incentives to, we've got to bring more business into Calgary. We've got the towers, we've got the business. I mean, when you drive downtown Calgary now and it's a ghost town, it's sad. And now we've got an event center and an arena, so we obviously we've got to fill these buildings up one way or another.
All right. Let me, I've got just a few final questions here for you. The issue of the referenda, you already mentioned that. One on fluoride is going forward. Another on speed limits was rejected, and the city made the decision themselves to reduce speed limits to 40 kilometers per hour in residential areas. Do you think the council made the right decision on both of those?
No, they should have left it on. We have a ballot in 6 months. I mean, why not put it on there? It's that simple. So the speed limits, I will get both sides of the coin on that one. I would like to hear the residents. I guess the story that's when you're out kind of canvassing and knocking doors, and it's a main drag where it's 50 kilometers an hour, and they're changing the signs now. And here's the city worker on a Sunday, I might add, changing that sign to 50. From 50 to 50, just a new sign. So whoever got that contract, again, that's wasteful right there. And other things, I don't want a parking lot for our school zones. So I have my own opinions. I would have left it just the way it is, personally, because there's a cost added to that, and there's a flow of traffic, and enforcement seems to be the bigger way to actually maybe slow down these high traffic areas. So, and again, the money was I didn't think was worth spending, but I would like to have seen that on the ballot and let everybody. And the same with fluoride. I have my own positions on that, but I like to see. I have no problem with plebiscites, and even if there's an issue, if I were to be elected, I would do a robocall or a customer constituent engagement process on the big issues and ask them. So, what do you want me to do? Because that's what I am. I'm going to be your servant, and that's the I don't like what they did there, Daniel.
Okay. Let's then talk about sort of the three big funding areas of frontline services: police, fire, and EMS. Let me begin with what is called the defund police movement. As I understand it, they want to identify a portion of the police budget to be redirected to other social services so that there can be a different response on mental health and addiction calls. Do you support that?
No. It sounds like, how could you not support that? But taking money out of the police budget. Now, if you show me a way that I can keep those services at the same way and reduce your costs in that budget, maybe, because anytime you get a budget, again, going back to the golf business, the golf course would get this budget and they will spend every single dime of it. So then next year they could get a little bit bigger budget. So that's just kind of the way these cities work. But there's got to be some incentives to, if we're allocating X amount of dollars to the police, let's see what you can do your same job. But I'm not in favor of cutting police services. We've seen that in having just to fund the police in other jurisdictions, and crime rates have gone up. And where I'm at, we have a lot of backyard, lots of crime. Not people do not want to see less police; they like to see more police. So now, allocating it towards like some mental health, there might be a component where that can work. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction to some other issues that are maybe happening in other cities or in another country. Right here, I'm just a big defender of back in the blue, and I'm just going to stick with that.
Okay, let's then talk about EMS, because the city got into a bit of a scrap with the province over centralized dispatch. Do you have a position on that?
I'd like to see the data. I've seen the fight on that. I could see what they were trying to do that with the Alberta Health Services saying we can save millions of dollars by having, and then the other side says, well, it's going to cost lives and it's going to be 2-3 minutes before that call is received and dispatch occurs. I haven't seen anything to tell me that one way or another, which is, because I like the idea of consolidation. Anytime you can consolidate and save money and be more efficient, I'm for that. Now, has this been so efficient right now? I know there's one up in Wood Buffalo. There was an issue, I think, up in Fort McMurray, where they had one issue. I want to review all that data. So this has been done. I'm not opposed to the idea. I understand where, like, mayor and council were kind of saying you're taking away powers from me and money from the city. So that maybe was their issue. So with politics, let's be a little more honest. Let's talk about, is this the issue because you actually want the power of control and the money that comes with having 911 in your city, or is it because it's actually going to cost lives? So I see both aspects of that one as well. It's done, but again, I'd have to see all the data.
Sure. Let me just finish with fire, because one of the things we found out in the discussion about dispatch is that fire is the first responder on a lot of medical calls. We also had heard issues about the construction proposals of new communities. One of the reasons those 10 communities were put on hold is because they didn't think they'd have the resources to build fire halls and staff them. Do you think that the fire budget needs to have a closer look, or do you think they've got things pretty well right?
I'm going to have to tell you, I've got to look into that one. I don't have an answer. I haven't reviewed that budget in the fire department. I mean, my quick observation, some of these new communities I've looked at, and here's this cute little fire hall. And it's just like we've got a few new communities in my ward, several: Sirocco, Yorkville, Belmont, and it's just the tiniest little fire department. And kind of cute, but it looks like it's a fire department. It's got one fire truck, and it's probably got some staffing. And then you go to some other areas, and there's this massive fire department, the building and the trucks, and so you go, well, wait a minute, did they overbuild here? So again, we need to have fire services. And again, I'd have to delve into this, but I do know sometimes when you'll see emergency services show up for, say, someone has a heart attack, and I've seen like several police cars, a fire truck, and then the ambulance. I don't know if that's an overreaction. Again, the protocols, I've heard both sides, and I'm not really well versed on that, so I'd like to look into that. But so I don't have a really cogent answer for you on that one, but I'd look into it.
No, it's a good observation, though, about the potential for overbuild. So appreciate that answer. Let me talk just one final question about the balance that you have. And you mentioned that one of the things that attracted you to this level of office is you run as an independent. And so the question would be, is if you had a decision to make that your board was telling you to make a decision one way, but administration was saying, well, for the good of the city as a whole, we should do this. How would you balance that?
Well, I guess that's what you elect me for. I mean, there's going to be decisions like that I'm going to think that I wouldn't be doing this or running if I didn't think I was going to be good at it. At the end of the day, some people are looking for a job. It's not a very stable job. You can lose it in 4 years, and then contrary to public opinion, it doesn't pay that extremely well either. But I think that the reason I would be doing it is that I'm going to read up on everything and give it a very thoughtful approach. And when that decision comes down to it, I'll make it. And, if it conflicts with your residents, that would be a tough one. It'd be a tough one. I'd have to look at to see where it stands, because polling is kind of off the charts. But for the betterment of the city, and getting along with the city councils, compromises will have to be made. That's just the nature of the beast.
All right, Dan McLean, thanks so much for your time today.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful. I pretty appreciate it.
You got it. That's your Ward 13 candidate, Dan McLean.
All right. Thanks, Danielle. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye now.